Sean Diddy Combs, now a convicted felon, is spending his first Christmas behind bars at the federal prison in Fort Dix, New Jersey. And as the disgraced music mogul stares down a multi-year prison sentence, continues to deal with ongoing civil litigation, and also has to deal with the fallout from a very highly publicized documentary on Netflix, we are taking a look at how we got here and what Combs can expect in terms of holiday celebrations.
What's happening right now isn't just uncomfortable. It isn't just rough. It's grim in a way that settles into the bones and doesn't leave. The kind of situation where every hour stretches longer than the last and nothing feels temporary anymore.
Enrollment, comparing the exploitative premiums and fine print of health insurance, it's pretty chaotic to say the least. Here's the good news. Crowd Health is different. Why? The members fund each other's bills directly. If something big happens, you pay the first $500 and the crowd funds the rest. They have a track record of handling major events, including bills over $1 million, giving you confidence that you need. Plus, you get access to low-cost prescriptions, testing, high-quality doctors. And look, with ACA subsidies expiring, premiums, they're going to skyrocket. And so far, members have saved over $40 million. So this open enrollment, take your power back. Join Crowd Health to get started today for $99 for your first 3 months. Use code SIDEBAR at joincrowdhealth.com. Crowd Health, it's not insurance. You can opt out. This is how we win. Joincrowdhealth.com. Well, instead of jet-setting off to a tropical location or entertaining his kids at one of his many properties, Sean Diddy Combs is celebrating the holidays at a federal prison in New Jersey. It is his first Christmas as a convicted felon and his first Christmas at the FCI Fort Dix. Combs was sentenced to 50 months in prison after his conviction on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, so it's about 4 years, but with credit for time served. Now, I will tell you, in a little bit, I am going to be speaking with somebody who is apparently consulting with Diddy right now in prison. But in the months leading up to his trial in New York City, Combs was housed at the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center out in Brooklyn. This is a notorious jail of more than 1,000 inmates that has been plagued with issues for years. Violence, deplorable conditions, smuggling of contraband like drugs. There's a lack of manpower, apparently. But after the jury handed down their decision, so acquitting the 56-year-old of racketeering and sex trafficking charges, the highest counts that he was facing, Judge Arun Subramanian imposed the sentence, and Combs was then transferred to Fort Dix, this minimum security prison that his legal team had requested be his home for the foreseeable future. In an October 6 letter to the court, one of Combs' attorneys, Tenny Garagos, wrote, "On behalf of Mr. Combs, we respectfully request that the court strongly recommend a designation facility to the Bureau of Prisons in Mr. Combs' judgment in order to address drug abuse issues and to maximize family visitation and rehabilitative efforts. We request that the court strongly recommend to the Bureau of Prisons that Mr. Combs be placed at FCI Fort Dix for RDAP purposes and any other available educational and occupational programs." What's RDAP? Well, RDAP stands for Residential Drug Abuse Program. It's available only to federal prison inmates who have at least 2 years left on their sentence. According to CBS News, Combs was accepted into an RDAP and is, quote, an active participant. So according to federal regulations, to qualify for this program, inmates have to have a verifiable substance use disorder, they have to enter the program voluntarily, and they have to complete 3 components of that program. The first is a unit-based component, which requires inmates to complete a course provided by the Psychology Services Department. During that time, the inmates live separately from the general population. From there, the next stage involves follow-up services, and the third component is referred to as Community Treatment Services, or CTS. It's like a halfway house or something similar where former incarcerated people reintegrate into society while still having some sort of supervision. Now, it's our understanding that RDAP offers incentives. The regulations indicate there could be limited financial awards and other local incentives that can vary by institution, like preferred living quarters or special recognition or privileges. But completing a residential drug abuse program, RDAP, can even knock time off your sentence. So you can see how it's an attractive option. Now, we've heard about Combs' alleged drug use in the past, even, by the way, from his own lips.
The walls don't just hold someone in, they press in, day after day, until even breathing feels like a conscious effort. The conditions being whispered about aren't shocking because they're chaotic. They're disturbing because they're controlled. Everything is regulated, measured, stripped down to the bare minimum. Comfort is not part of the design. Stability exists, but it's cold and mechanical. There's no warmth in routine when the routine itself is meant to remind you that you have no say. Days begin before the body is ready. Lights snap on without warning. Sleep is interrupted, not ended. There's no gentle transition from rest to movement. The body lurches awake, already tense, already preparing for another stretch of forced alertness. Rest becomes shallow over time, and exhaustion piles up quietly. The air itself feels different, stale, heavy, like it's been breathed too many times already. Ventilation hums constantly, never fully silent, never comforting. It becomes background noise that seeps into the mind. Silence is rare, and when it does.
You might remember back in May of 2024, so this is months after his ex, Cassandra Ventura Fine, filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against him that was ultimately settled, where this kicked off a cascade of sexual assault allegations. There was that explosive surveillance video that was published, that was distributed, that was released. This is the now infamous footage where it shows Combs kicking and dragging Cassie as he tried to leave the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles back in 2016. Cassie has contended that she was trying to escape from a so-called freak-off, you know, these prolonged marathon-like sex sessions where she was required to be intimate with a male sex worker or Combs, sometimes both, while high on drugs like ecstasy. But when Combs realized that she had left, he comes running down the hallway, only wearing a towel, apparently trying to bully Cassie into returning to the room. That is until hotel security intervened. Now, that video spread like wildfire. It was seen by people all over the world, and some members of the public who had previously stood behind Combs questioned Cassie's narrative in her lawsuit. There was a big change. Those who were saying, you know, these allegations of him being violent and abusive, they were total falsehoods, started to falter, right? Started to change once that video came out. And going back to what I was mentioning, it was at this point that Combs posted an apology video to Instagram where he talked about drug abuse.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. Sometimes you gotta do that. I was up. I mean, I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy and go into rehab. Had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
And we also heard about Combs' drug use multiple times during his federal criminal trial. One of the witnesses called by the prosecution was Brendan Paul. He was accused of essentially being a, quote, drug mule for Sean Combs. This was after his arrest at Miami Opa-locka Airport in 2024. It was on the same day that Combs' properties in Miami and Los Angeles were raided by Homeland Security. Paul was found to be in possession of cocaine and marijuana-laced candy. Now, at trial, he testified that Combs had not instructed him to bring drugs onto the plane. Claims that he had just forgotten the drugs were in his bag. But he testified that it was loyalty that kept him from telling police the drugs weren't his. And when asked on the stand about how he feels about Sean Combs, he said it's complicated. As part of a plea deal, the charge for having the marijuana candy was dropped. Paul entered a drug diversion program, which is often offered to first-time offenders, and he was given immunity in exchange for his testimony. So nothing he said at trial could be used against him as long as it was truthful. During his testimony, Paul had this exchange with a prosecutor, quote, "Mr. Paul, were you ever instructed to obtain drugs for Mr. Combs?" "I was." "Who instructed you to obtain drugs for Mr. Combs?" "He did himself or other assistants." "What types of drugs did you buy from Mr. Combs?" "Marijuana, 2C, cocaine, ketamine, ecstasy." And when asked to explain what 2C is, he said it's basically just ketamine and some Molly in powder form dyed pink for the aesthetic. Later, the prosecution asked,
Does appear. It feels unnatural, almost threatening. Movement is limited and deliberate. Every step is accounted for. Every pause is noticed. There's no wandering, no pacing just to think. Space is rationed. Freedom of motion is treated like a privilege instead of a right. Even stretching feels watched. Food arrives without ceremony. It's fuel, not nourishment. Something to keep the body upright, not something to enjoy. The taste barely matters anymore. Hunger fades into routine. replaced by the understanding that eating is just another obligation. There's no comfort in it, no satisfaction, just the dull continuation of the day. What really disturbs people paying attention isn't a single horror story, it's the consistency, the sameness. Each day mirrors the last so closely that memory starts losing detail. You stop remembering what happened yesterday because it was identical to today. Time becomes thick, slow, and sticky, like moving through mud. The environment forces awareness at all times.
How did you and other assistants obtain drugs for Mr. Combs? Paul replied, we would text the drug dealer, and then the drug dealer would come to either of the homes. Now, I have to mention this as we're talking about Combs behind bars. There is something that could jeopardize Combs' admission to a drug treatment program. Bad behavior. There's been some back and forth about infractions that Combs has allegedly committed. TMZ reported that Combs was caught with homemade alcohol, something that Combs' team has adamantly denied. Now, CBS News reports that it has seen Bureau of Prisons documents that show Combs was part of a three-way call in November, something that is not allowed because of concerns about things like witness tampering or conducting criminal business from inside the prison. But Combs and his team apparently told prison officials that he was on a call with his attorney, who added one of his heads of communication to give the okay to a statement that they wanted to release. Combs also claims that no one told him about the regulations on the phone calls, and he never got the prison admission and orientation handbook. This is again according to CBS. But the paperwork allegedly contains a recommendation that Combs lose 90 days of phone and commissary privileges. It's unclear if that punishment actually happened. But Combs is keeping busy while he serves his sentence. Let's talk about that. So apparently he's gotten a job as a chaplain's assistant at Fort Dix. This is according to his publicist. A former commissioner told CBS News that it's one of the most wanted jobs in the institution. He gets to apparently work in a private office. There's air conditioning. He can eat food that's brought in for religious services. A corrections officer told the outlet that the chapel is one of the only places that inmates can congregate freely, that assistants are allowed to prepare a call-out list, which tells corrections officers who's allowed to leave their cells. Assistants could potentially add their friends to that list. But Combs is also apparently taking care of outside business from behind bars too. Yeah, just before Thanksgiving, his legal team alerted the court that Combs had paid the fines that he owed as part of his conviction and sentence. Quote, on October 16, 2025, this court entered an amended judgment imposing a $200 special assessment and a $500,000 fine to be paid in full not later than 60 days after the date of sentencing. We respectfully submit this letter to inform the court that Mr. Combs paid the fine and special assessment to the Southern District of New York cashier on November 24th, 2025. We talk about Combs behind bars, we also have to talk about an appeal, because as Combs works to shave off as much of his sentence as he can with good behavior and completion of the intensive drug program, his attorneys are working to not only get him out of prison, but also get his conviction thrown out. October 22nd, Combs' legal team filed a criminal appeal on his behalf with the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. They requested an expedited appeal, hoping to get Combs out of prison as soon as possible. They provided the court with a proposed schedule and said the government had no objection. And I'll tell you what, on November 3rd, Circuit Judge Beth Robinson filed this order. Quote, appellant moves to expedite the appeal on the following schedule. Appellant's opening brief and appendix due by December 23rd, 2025. The government's brief due by February 20th, 2026. Appellant's reply brief due by March 13th, 2026. And oral argument in April of 2026. It is hereby ordered that the motion is granted. Yeah, so we'll be on the lookout for that one as well. Okay, in the meantime, what do Combs' holidays look like now that he's in federal prison? Well, the multimillionaire won't be able to spend it like he used to, but there are special meals and activities that inmates can participate in. In fact, Combs apparently teamed up with an internal group called Bankroll Bosses to help organize and fund a special meal for his fellow inmates. According to a report from Us Weekly, the group volunteered to buy food from the prison's commissary, but they didn't just buy it. No, they reportedly spent 2 days preparing all of this food for these inmates. In all, the outlet reports that 1,000 inmates were served. Now, Combs gave this quote to Us Weekly through his spokesperson, quote, Thanksgiving to me is about making sure other people eat.
There is no true relaxation. Even sitting still requires caution. You learn quickly not to react, not to stand out, not to draw attention. Being invisible becomes a survival tactic. Personality gets muted, expression gets flattened. That kind of constant restraint changes a person. Shoulders stay tight, jaw clenches without realizing it. Breathing becomes shallow. The body adapts to tension as if it's normal, and after a while, calm feels unfamiliar. Sleep, when it comes, isn't restorative, it's fragmented, broken by noise, light, movement, and the mind's refusal to shut down. Thoughts replay endlessly, regrets resurface, anxiety sharpens in the dark. Without distractions, the brain turns inward, and not gently. Hygiene routines are rushed and impersonal: cold water, limited time, no privacy. Even basic self-care feels like another reminder of lost dignity. Mirrors reflect a face learning how to exist in a place that doesn't allow softness. The psychological pressure is relentless. Control is out.
Everybody misses their family. People get depressed during the holidays. We just wanted to come together as a family and do our own thing. Now, there's no word on what exactly Combs and other inmates purchased from the commissary to make this meal, but it is apparently a very nice gesture regardless. According to TMZ, the Christmas menu at Fort Dix includes a whole Cornish hen, mashed potatoes, cornbread dressing, mixed vegetables. But now I want to bring on a very special guest. Okay, so now I want to welcome back on prison consultant Justin Perperni. And I want to welcome back on not just because I love having Justin on, but Justin, you are now working with Sean Combs and his team while he's in prison. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Well, I've had a connection through a mutual friend with Sean for many years. And when you're in custody, when you're sitting in segregation, it can change you and you want to learn. So our mutual friend a while back sent him a book called Earning Freedom that was written by my friend, Michael Santos, who I met in prison, who mentored me. And Michael spent a year in segregation before he was convicted and served a long time in prison. So our friend thought that book could help him get through his own crisis. And when you're in prison, you relate to people who are enduring a similar crisis. So I was very encouraged when she sent the book and he read the book and said, I can't change what's happened, but I'd like to begin to use this experience as an opportunity to help people in prison. So through Prison Professors Charitable Corporation, which does work in every BOP prison, it does work in a lot of state facilities as well, he has begun to document and say, how can I use this experience as a way to help people? And the beauty of that is you read these interviews about people in prison, even people who have been in Fort Dix. We have other people in our community at Fort Dix. And the common refrain in prison is, it's boring. The days feel like Groundhog Day. It doesn't have to be, right? It can be incredibly productive, and you can get there by learning from other people and beginning to document the journey. So that's how the relationship began. And it's really an emphasis on using the experience productively, recognizing you can't change what led to this 15-month sentence right now, but he can change how he responds. And when you do that, you bring a lot of meaning to your own prison term. The days don't feel long and boring. And you also begin to help other people. And regardless of how you feel about Sean Combs, you can't deny that he has an ability to inspire and help other people. And he's beginning to do that on the inside. And I think that's wonderful. So I'll always be grateful our friend sent him a copy of Earning Freedom, and he went through it and he's learning from it. He's implementing the strategies we teach.
What are some of the ways that he's helping? I mean, I mentioned before that he has this specific position as a chaplain's assistant, helped with Thanksgiving meals. What else is he doing to help his inmates?
So there are some people in prison who they just continue to play the victim. It's not their fault. They've been harmed. The prosecutor's looking to advance their career. Everyone has an agenda, and it would have been a shame, I expressed to the team, if he didn't use the experience to focus on the good that he can do. So how can he be of value to people? When a prisoner is getting ready for their release from prison, do you know what it's like before you go home from prison, Jesse? Do you know the anxiety someone faces? They're scared. Yeah, they're scared. You're a convicted felon. You've been debanked. You can't get a license. You might not be able to get housing. You might be unemployable. You don't have a documented record that shows why you're a candidate for a second chance. So clearly, given his business skill set, his success, rather than lament about the unfairness and blame everybody, he said, I'm here. I'm going to use the experience productively. Well, how do you do that? You do what he began to do before he got even sentenced to prison. And I think his lawyers did a good job of expressing to the judge how he used his time in detention at MDC well by mentoring other prisoners. What would you like to do when you come home? Well, how do you develop that? How do you build that? What relationships do you need? What education do you need to develop? Is there value in
absolute? When to wake, when to eat, when to move, when to stop. Choice disappears in small ways first, then completely. The loss doesn't hit all at once. It settles slowly, like realizing one day that you no longer ask questions because answers don't change anything. That's the part insiders find hardest to describe. Not fear in the dramatic sense, but a constant low-level vigilance. always watching, always listening, always calculating. It drains energy faster than physical labor ever could. Conversations, when they happen, are careful. Words are chosen sparingly. Silence is often safer. Trust is rare. Even neutral interactions carry weight. A glance can mean nothing or everything, and learning the difference takes time and mistakes. The body changes under these conditions. Movements slow, reactions dull, emotions flatten, not because the person doesn't feel, but because feeling too much is dangerous. Detachment becomes protection. The loss of control is constant, being told when to eat, when to move, when to stop. No choice over.
It was really, kind of seemed to strike that theme as well, because he's saying, he had forced me out of the stake of my company. He had to deal with things like homelessness, while in the 2000s and 2010s, Diddy was really prospering, music, business, fashion. And one of the things that he had said, what he alleged in the documentary, and again, this is an allegation from him, was that the name Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs's name was not really involved in that on the corporate side. And one of the things he's saying is the reason for that was to avoid having to pay any liability from, the devastating basketball game that had happened in the early 90s, where he was the subject of wrongful death lawsuits because of the multiple deaths that had occurred as a result of that basketball game that Diddy was behind organizing. So that was really, surprising to hear.
Yeah, that was a big allegation, because the families of the victims killed in that stampede. It was horrible. We're talking about December 28th, 1991. Combs, fellow rapper Heavy D, they hosted this charity basketball game. The game took place at the gymnasium of the City College of New York. And according to the New York Daily News, before the basketball game started, people who weren't let inside, they broke a window, swarmed toward the entrance of the gym, all went down a staircase. The doors at the bottom of those stairs opened towards the stairs, not towards the gym. So once a crowd got down there, they couldn't get the doors open and people started being crushed. 9 people died, dozens of others were injured. And there were no criminal charges that were ever filed against anyone for the stampede, but multiple families and injured victims, they filed lawsuits. And that's just one part, right? So I actually wanted to get into this too. The docuseries devoted a lot of time to the killings of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls, and Combs' alleged connections to this, to both men, obviously knew both of them. So there have been accusations made in the past that Combs' involvement in the East Coast, West Coast rap feud of the 90s, there was more than just talk, that it could have involved things like hit orders. Now, to be clear, these are allegations. There's no evidence to suggest this. This series, though, it emphasizes that he has never been investigated or charged regarding their assassinations. Nevertheless, several interviewees during this documentary expressed that Combs' actions seem suspicious in hindsight. The documentary plays part of an interview that Dwayne Keefe D. Davis did with investigators looking into Tupac's murder, which had become a cold case. And on the tapes, Keefe D. says that Combs agreed to pay him if he killed Tupac and also rival record label head Suge Knight. Now, Davis allegedly admitted that his nephew Orlando Anderson was the one who shot the men, killing Tupac, injuring Knight. But Davis says Combs never came through with any payment. And by the way, Davis is currently awaiting trial for Tupac's murder in Las Vegas. Combs has always denied any involvement in the assassination. That was a big moment, I would say, Elizabeth. That was a big part of this. I didn't know that was going to be a part of this documentary.
I was really surprised as well. So I believe it's the second episode that dedicates a lot of time to it. And like you said, there have been insinuations in the past. They played video clips of, Sean Combs being asked in prior interviews in the 90s and 2000s, do you know, who killed these men? Did you have any involvement? He's always denied it, to be clear. These are just allegations. But yeah, that was really, really shocking. And one of the sort of a little bit more of the backstory behind his alleged involvement with Tupac was that a lot of the interviewees in the documentary were saying that Biggie, who was signed with Bad Boy and who was really close with Diddy at the time, was starting to form a friendship with Tupac, and they were getting really close. And a lot of the interviewees were saying, in their view, Diddy didn't really appreciate that. So I think a lot of the themes that you see again is coming up as him sort of wanting and needing to be the number one person in people's lives, whether it was personal, business. And it's really interesting because you see a lot of the themes that, again, the prosecution was trying to push forward.
The smallest details. For someone used to autonomy, that shift is crushing. It reinforces a brutal truth. Nothing from the past offers protection here. Status doesn't matter. History doesn't matter. Everything resets. That realization hits harder than any physical discomfort, because it confirms that this environment operates on its own rules, and survival depends entirely on adaptation, not identity. Fear inside isn't always loud, it's subtle. It's the fear of misreading a situation, of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, of trusting the wrong silence, of misunderstanding a look. According to what's emerging, safety isn't about strength, it's about awareness and restraint. And that awareness never turns off. Even downtime doesn't feel calm. Recreation isn't relaxing. Quiet moments feel loaded. The brain is constantly processing surroundings, constantly adjusting behavior. That level of vigilance slowly erodes mental clarity. Focus weakens. Emotions flatten. Everything starts to feel distant, like you're watching your own life from the outside. This is the real horror being described. Not chaos, not constant violence, but a system designed to wear someone down slowly and efficiently. A place where nothing
that we saw in his personal life with Cassandra Ventura always needing to be number one, not necessarily regarding the damages he's doing to other people in the prosecution's eyes, right? Playing out in the business sense. So the backstory is that he didn't appreciate the friendship that was forming between Biggie and Tupac, and therefore, that's where his alleged involvement came in. And then when, in terms of the non-payment, I think that was also a really shocking moment as well, because that's something we saw happening over and over in the documentary. Multiple people who are saying, I was cheated out of my share in the company. I wasn't paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. And allegedly, that's sort of how he treated the artists that were on his label. So again, it's the theme of always wanting to be number one and, not necessarily giving people their due, business sense or personal sense.
Okay, so with that, I will tell you, I think one of the most shocking allegations comes to Biggie Smalls, okay? You talk about finances, you talk about that, okay. One of the biggest names at Bad Boy, seemingly very close friends with Sean Combs. Well, according to Kirk Burrows, Combs, and again, this is his allegation, according to Kirk Burrows, Combs insisted that Biggie travel to Los Angeles as part of an album tour, and this is despite, the serious dangers that were present from the rivalries, the East Coast, West Coast. And once there, Combs allegedly decided to cancel a trip that Biggie was supposed to take to the UK, instead saying he needed to stay in LA. Combs apparently threw a large party, and after which, someone opened fire on the car that Biggie was riding in, killing him. Now, Burrows alleges that Combs used all of this publicity around Biggie's murder and his massive funeral to just gain his own fame for his own benefit, shooting to the top of the charts with the song Missing You, which featured, by the way, Biggie's widow. But this was one salacious claim that I really wasn't expecting. According to Burrows, Combs, allegedly, charged the costs of that massive funeral to Biggie's estate and had Biggie's recently renegotiated contract changed to make it more favorable for Bad Boy Records and less favorable for Biggie's loved ones after his death. Elizabeth, again, that one I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, it was really unexpected. And again, I think it speaks to the strength of the documentary, just at least creatively and what they were able to get in terms of the interviewees, claims that we hadn't heard before. So the claims were that, he had wanted in the documentary, the interviews talk about Diddy had said, we need to put on the biggest funeral New York has ever seen for Biggie. And when apparently, allegedly, when he saw how much it would cost, that's when he had said, we'll be charging this to the estate, allegedly. One of the other things was he had wanted to put out that song about Biggie after he had passed away, and that was really a big moment. He had performed it at the MTV Movie Awards. And then one of the other claims was, Biggie was set to debut on the cover of Rolling Stone, or at least be on the cover of Rolling Stone. And allegedly, one of the interviewees says after he had passed, Sean Combs had called him and said, I'm coming out with my first solo album. I need that cover. So Sean Combs had allegedly taken that cover from Biggie even after he had passed away. And again, it kind of rides to this theme of, in the public, his friend had passed away. He was devastated, but sort of what you see behind the scenes, at least what the documentary is alleging, is all the different ways he's using that to help benefit him financially and in terms of his career, which is something that we hadn't seen before. And, even myself, like I'm sure you empathize, Jesse, as a millennial, we grew up seeing Diddy, knowing the backstory of him and Biggie and sort of knowing that song and thinking, oh, they were close friends. He paid tribute to his friend. That's so moving. And then to hear all of these allegations, it really paints, another picture.
I remember when that happened. It was such a sad time, and to think about them dedicating a song to his close friend, I mean, it hit an emotional core. You looked at Diddy in a totally different light. Now, these, again, are a different narrative, a different allegation. We're trying to piece it together. I do want to get into the jurors, okay? So the jurors at the trial. Before we do, let me just highlight a couple more things, and then we'll get into the jurors in the cease and desist letter. So
dramatic has to happen for damage to be done. The nightmare isn't about one bad day. It's about every day being the same. The longer that continues, the harder it becomes to imagine anything else. Hope doesn't disappear all at once. It fades quietly, It thins out. It becomes harder to access. And once it's gone, getting it back feels impossible. That's why these details are so unsettling. They don't describe disorder. They describe control. And that control doesn't need to be cruel to be devastating. It just needs to be constant. Slow, relentless, unchanging. And once you're trapped inside that rhythm, the scariest realization isn't that something terrible might happen. It's that this is simply life now. Recreation doesn't feel like relief. It's controlled, limited, watched. There's no escape in it. Just a slight change in scenery that still reminds you where you are. Freedom is never fully simulated. It's hinted at, then taken away again. The sense of identity erodes quietly. Past achievements, status, reputation, none of it matters here. The system doesn't recognize history. It only recognizes compliance. That realization is devastating in a way that's hard to articulate. People on the outside imagine dramatic breakdowns or explosive moments. What's actually happening is far more unsettling. It's a slow recalibration of the mind, a gradual acceptance of limitations that once would have felt unbearable. Hope doesn't vanish in one moment. It thins. It becomes quieter. It waits in the background while routine takes over. And once routine hardens, imagining a different life becomes difficult. That's why these conditions are leaving people disturbed, not because they're lawless, but because they're methodical, efficient, designed to reduce a human being to compliance through repetition. There's no single headline-worthy moment. Just day after day of pressure. Day after day of controlled discomfort. Day after day of learning how to exist in a place that gives nothing back. And the longer it continues, the more it changes someone in ways that can't be easily undone. That's the grim reality being hinted at. Not a collapse. Not chaos. But a slow, grinding transformation that happens quietly, behind walls, while the world moves on without noticing.